Welcome back to another MTBC Telling Our Stories. Today we have Joe Freyer with us. Joe is a deacon at our church. He is also now head of the missions committee. Been a member here for a few years now. Joe, just want to say thank you for coming and sharing your story and sharing your heart of what Jesus has done in your life. So thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Awesome.
Happy to finally be doing it.
Yeah, track him down finally. So before we get started and dive into your story, I do want to give background about who you are, or I want you to give background who you are. Just share a little bit about yourself of family, hobbies, work, interests, things like that.
Okay. Well, I was born in Omak, Washington. We had an apple orchard out there, and that's what our family started doing. But my dad worked for the state, and so we moved around a lot when I was a child. Never went to the same school over a year. We moved every year. The state moved him every year somewhere different, so we'd do different things. And then when I was about, I guess it was eight or nine, he got the opportunity to move to Kentucky and start horse business, which was his passion, and what he always wanted to do was be in the horse business. So we moved back here, like I said, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and we took over my grandfather's general store, which was in a holler. Everybody likes to laugh at that word, a holler in Kentucky. So we took over the store, and then we started our horse business, and then we had horses in several state parks across Tennessee and Kentucky and edge of Ohio and Virginia. And that was the family business, and my mom and sister ran the store, and the rest of the boys ran the horse business. I'm married. I've been married twice. I was married to my first wife, Margie. I married her, I guess, when I was like 19. And then she got pregnant. We had my only son, Joseph. I'm trying to think of the dates, but anyhow, we stay, and she's passed now. She's passed a few years back. We moved to Ohio. We lived in Middlesboro, Kentucky, and we moved to Ohio, to Cincinnati. And I had an opportunity up there to start working at a company up there. So we moved to Ohio. And we were up there probably about a year or two. And Margie, my first wife, decided that she needed something different in her life. So she left and went back to Middlesboro. Well, that went on for me and her for probably 2 years, because she came back 2 or 3 times. But after the third time, it was just tearing my son all to pieces. Her coming and going. So we ended it, and we got divorced. But I kept custody of my son. So we just went on, our daily routine, me working. But I worked a lot of hours. I mean, it was nothing for me to work 100-hour weeks. I was chasing money. And I guess I'm kind of getting ahead a little bit, but just my background. So anyhow, I worked a lot of hours. My mom came up to help take care of my son, because I didn't have any family up there, obviously. It was just me and my son. And my employer's wife was actually helping take care of my son. So anyhow, my mother came up there to take care of my son. And long story through that, she stayed with me up there until she passed, actually. After a year or two after my wife had left, maybe 3 years after, I joined a single parents group to try to introduce my son to other people and myself. And and I said this at my ordination, but we were at a party with the singles group, and one of the women dared me to call into B105, which was just a radio station up there. And I did. And they paired me up with Michelle, and we talked for like an hour. And the woman that actually dared me to call the radio station was the girl that I was dating at the time.
Mm.
So kind of a funny story there,
Yeah, I
you
would
know.
say so.
And so we ended up setting up a date to meet, and we met at an Applebee's date night now, but at the time it wasn't that. So anyhow, we set up a date, and we got there, I don't know, probably 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they asked us to leave at 11:30. They said, we have to close at some point. So obviously that went well, and obviously it went well because we've been married now for a long time. I'm not going to say the number because I'm afraid I'll get in trouble for it. But anyhow, so we got married, and then I don't know the year. I think it was probably 2005. Michelle had the opportunity to move to South Carolina with Ford Credit. That's who she works for, and she didn't really an opportunity. It was either you do it or you lose your job.
One of those situations.
Yeah. And the company that I worked for, that I had worked for ever since I'd been in Ohio, I'd worked for the same company. They were fixing to restructure and relocate. And I was the office manager, sort of. And they kind of gave me a choice to go with them if I wanted to, but it wasn't really going to benefit anything. So we decided to go with Michelle, and I would just come down here. And I had a company out of Atlanta that had already offered me a job anyway. So we moved down here, and basically we've lived around down here quite a bit. We've moved quite a few times. And up to that point, I guess I should go back and say that when I met Michelle was in church. And she's always been a Christian woman and always not pushed church on me, but always talked church to me. And when we were in Ohio, we lived out on a farm for a while before we moved down here and stuff. And she would always ask me on Sundays, do you want to go to church this Sunday? 99% of the time, I just said no. I mean, I was still living my life. And that was all I was thinking about was my life. But we did go occasionally here and there. We went to church. And then when we moved down here, it became a little bit more evident to me that was important to her, which made it important to me, which in the long run, I figured out it was more important to me than I thought it was before.
Yeah.
So we started visiting, we lived in Greenville at the time, and we started visiting some churches up there and ended up Bethel Baptist in, I guess it's Fountain Inn. We joined Bethel Baptist, and we went there as long as we were there. And then when I started having to actually go into the company I worked for, into their office in Atlanta, we decided to move to Anderson because it made me an hour drive and her 45 or 50-minute drive. So it kind of equaled it up a little bit. And then we started looking for churches here. And we went to several different churches and just didn't find one that felt like home. And I think part of the reason of that was me using that as an excuse. I'll just be honest. I mean, I think Michelle just wanted to be in church, but I was using it as I'd tell her we'd go to a church and I'd say, well, this church has this problem. This church has this problem. This church has this problem. Well, they didn't have problems. I had problems. So finally, but we came to this church, and I don't know if it was just, God convicting me or whatever, but the first time we come to this church, I told Michelle, I said, I feel at home there. I said, it's the first church that we've went to that I felt welcome at, I felt at home at, I felt at ease at, or whatever, So we went here for, I don't know, probably 3 years. And Michelle went regularly. I went semi-regularly, and we finally decided to join. And so we joined Mount Tabor, and like I said, one of the things that helped me is being convicted, but one of the things that helped me is the way the church looked after Michelle, because I work out of town all the time. And at that time, I was out of town 5 or 6 days a week. So that's kind of how we got to this point. And then, like, my hobbies, man, there's a list of them, because I'm not one of them people that just like one four-wheelers. I got into four-wheelers, and I've had 15 or 20 four-wheelers, and I've had people, Barry and Tamla, Jeff and Laura Bland. I've had people from here come up to Kentucky, and we'd ride four-wheelers every weekend. I did that for several years.
Mm-hmm.
Me and Michelle was into the horses.
Mm-hmm.
We bought horses and horse trailers and started camping with the horses and the horse trailers every weekend. We did that for several years. Everybody knows I ride motors, or most people know that I ride motorcycles, and I've always had a motorcycle. So a hobby is riding motorcycles. When I was younger, I used to hunt and fish a lot. I actually don't do that a lot anymore, just time. I just don't seem like I ever have time to
sit in a stand for hours
Yeah,
and wait for
yeah.
maybe something.
Yeah. And especially when I can just go hop on a motorcycle and go take a hour ride and come back and park it, and it's done. And I don't have to do anything about it. You know, I don't have to clean it. I don't have to dress it. I don't have to do all that stuff. So hobbies, I've had a lot of hobbies like that. We like road trips.
Mm-hmm.
Me and Michelle's always done that. You know, we jump in a car, and I don't mind driving.
Mm-hmm.
As people, you know, I work in Kentucky. I don't mind driving.
Yeah.
I don't. There's days when I'll leave Kentucky and drive all the way to Cincinnati to say hi to my sister for 30 minutes, turn around, drive back to Kentucky that night after I get off work.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't mind driving. So we do a lot of road trips and like traveling.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that's kind of most everything about me.
Okay.
I think.
Awesome. So you've talked a little bit about your journey in church and everything, but can you share when you came to know Jesus as your Savior and Lord?
Yes, sir. That would have been at Red Oak Baptist Church in Middlesboro, Kentucky. And it's when I was with my first wife, who also was a good Christian woman. Mm-hmm. I should say that. I mean, I know we divorced, and I know that's not proper, and but it happened, so I can't get away from that. It happened. But she was in church also when I met her. I didn't go to church. We went to church some, but I think she had kind of backslid, and I had too, I guess, which I had never really been saved. She had. But so we started going to Red Oak Baptist Church. Probably went for, I don't know, I guess a good year. Mm-hmm. And one Sunday, and it was just random. I mean, there was no, I hadn't really thought about it. You know, a lot of people say, you know, I've been thinking about this and I've been praying about it. And I can't say that I really thought about it that hard. Mm-hmm. But just one Sunday evening service, we went to church. And I kind of, to back up a little bit, we rented a house right next door to a guy named Hobart, and he belonged to Red Oak Baptist. Mm-hmm. That's how we ended up at Red Oak Baptist, because he kept inviting us. He was just a real nice guy, and he just kept saying, just come one Sunday night. Just come one Sunday. Well, we did, and ended up going for a year there. And then this random Sunday night, we just went to church like you would any other day. Mm-hmm. We're sitting back there, and all of a sudden, it's just like, God reached down and smacked me upside the head and said, hey, look, it's time you think about where you're going and what's happening. Yeah. So I went to the front, still not knowing what I was doing. Mm-hmm. Just thinking, I'm going to go up there and pray and I guess make myself feel better, is what I'm thinking. Yeah. And so I go to the front and I kneel at the altar and I start praying, and I'm one of them people that a lot of times, especially before then, my prayers were a minute long, 2 minutes long. I did the same thing that I guess I hear a lot of people talk about, ask for this and ask for that. Mm-hmm. Well, it wasn't like that time. Mm. I could just tell. It ended up being, 30, 40-minute prayer. And I went through emotional of all different things, and it was a very supportive church. It was a lot like Mount Tabor. Mm-hmm. It was a little smaller than Mount Tabor, but when I quit praying and come to, of course, Hobart was kneeling beside me. The preacher, Boyd Gray, was kneeling beside me, but the whole congregation was. Yeah. So, I knew, because as I prayed, I guess. At first I was just praying, like I said. I just thought I was just praying. But as I prayed and as I prayed and as I prayed, I could feel the conviction. And by the time I got done, it just felt kind of like a weight was lifted.
Yeah.
You know, like a light had come on, I guess you might say in my heart, but more in my head. Like a light came on in my head saying, hey, you finally woke up.
Yeah.
You know. So, because I think I look back before that day, and I know, because I had been in church almost all my life. And I look back at how many times God convicted me when I didn't really even see it that way. But after I was saved and I look back at times it happened, I seen that, you know, there was just multiple times that God convicted me and protected me from my own stupidity.
Yeah.
You know, it's just amazing. You don't see that, I guess, when you think you're in control.
Yeah.
But when you let go of that, you all of a sudden you see that you know, God was always in control.
Yeah.
You just thought you were.
Yeah.
So.
That's a good point you make, that God had protected you so you could come to this point of giving your life to Him there at that church that day, and that moment where the light did come on, like you said. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, you know, like, again, I look back at, you know, like I had an accident when I was living in Harlan, Kentucky. I worked for a construction company, and it was on Christmas Eve. We were only supposed to work till 11 o'clock and then have a little Christmas party with the construction crew. And we were refacing a grocery store, I guess, a little country grocery store. We were putting new fascia on it. And me and my brother, Kurt, my older brother, both worked for him. And we had one little square, literally a 2 foot by 2 foot square, and we would be finished. It was right across from the hospital in Harlan, Kentucky, Appalachian Regional Hospital. And a guy lifted us up. Instead of putting the scaffold back up, he said, just jump on the forklift, and I'll just run you up around the forklift. It'll take you 2 minutes to screw in this 2 foot by 2 foot facial bore. And so Kurt grabbed the board and I grabbed the screw gun, and we went up the forklift sitting on a pallet that he had picked up. Well, it was snowing to beat 90. There was probably 5 or 6 inches of snow on the ground. And nobody even thought about that. You know, he ran us up. Next thing I remember, I woke up in the hospital. He had got us at 32 feet, and the the pallet just gave way. And so we both fell. And I broke my back in 3 places. My arm had a concussion. My brother broke both his legs, had a concussion and stuff. And I was laying in the emergency room at the hospital. And I'm telling this so that I looked, at the time I never even thought about it, but I look back, and it's one of the major times that God stepped in. Because the Appalachian Regional Hospitals are not known to be maybe the best hospitals in the world. I mean, they do what they do. And the one in Harlan around there was known to be kind of a butcher shop. I don't know how else to say that. I'm not being, but so I'm laying in the emergency room, and they're prepping me for surgery. Now, what was so, I guess, a God thing, this was on Christmas Eve. The head of orthopedic surgery from UK Medical Center in Lexington happened to be there giving a speech to the hospital on Christmas Eve. And as he walked out to get on his helicopter to fly back, he seen me laying over there. And he walked over and said, what's going on with this guy? And asking the nurses and the doctor. They said, we're prepping him for surgery. He just fell right across the road, and he broke his back in 3 places, and we're going to have to go in and do surgery. And all the bones were hanging out of my arm. I had multiple fractures, compound fractures on my arm. And he just looked at him. He said, if you operate on this boy, he said, I'll shut this hospital down. Why? So anyhow, long story short, they didn't. He put me on a helicopter. The helicopter was not able to take off. It was snowing so hard. So they had to put me in the ambulance, and then they drove me to Lexington, and where he did not operate on me, but I stayed in the hospital there for you know, I think it was 3 or 4 months, had to learn to walk again, had to learn to do everything again.
Yeah.
But still, to me, that was a God thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if they had operated on me, I probably would have never walked again.
Yeah.
And that's what he said. He said, if they would have operated on you, you'd have been a cripple the rest of your life.
Mm.
So, but, you know, I've had several instances in my life when I was doing the wrong things that why God, I guess, had a plan for me.
Yeah.
But why he protected me in those times is my point. I mean, there was times where, you know, I've had 2 or 3 motorcycle accidents that I shouldn't have walked away from. And I literally walked away from with just bruises and bumps. And I mean, people that witnessed it said that, you know, you should be dead. So to me, there's only one person that can make that happen.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. His steadfast love never ceases.
yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
So you talk about a few moments of life. Are there other times and instances where you can just say, man, I know that God just showed up in this?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many, we could probably sit here all day and talk about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's several, and I probably wasn't going to say this, but, you know, I got into drugs. I got into a lot of, and this was back in the 80s because I'm an 80s kid, 70s and 80s kid. I got into doing a lot of drugs, acid and Quaaludes and cocaine and stuff. And I started running them to help support my habit. And there's a couple times when things went south. And, you know, you hear it all the time and there's one particular that happened in Tennessee, and I shouldn't have walked away from it. But, you know, again, and to this day, I can't really say how I walked away from it because I don't know. I mean, I shouldn't have walked away from it, but I did. And then there was a lot of littler instances too, you know, just little things like the motorcycle accidents, because I've had a couple of them. Just different times, even working when I worked, because I was a truck driver and had a couple accidents in Ohio when I was working in Ohio. I was a truck driver before I took over the office manager job for the same company. And a couple accidents where it totaled out a semi. And I walked out of it without a bruise. You know, to me, all of them has to be God's intervention. Yeah. Because he had some other plan somewhere for me.
Yeah. I would say your story is one where, or just hearing you're at a point in your life, you're looking back and you're seeing all the fingerprints of the Lord through, I mean, even just what you said at the very beginning, random time that you're dared to call into a radio show and you meet Michelle, and Michelle, you know, you start your life together, and then because of Michelle's love for you, bringing you to church and bringing you to where you are now, you know, it's, man, I think of a song called Evidence. I think it's Josh Baldwin, and it talks about all throughout my history. I see how you were leading and guiding me. That's what I'm hearing from your story is looking back and seeing God's hand, even when you didn't see it in the moment.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's powerful. It's powerful. So with all these experiences and like we've talked about, you looking back and seeing, you know, God's hand, his fingerprints in your life, now, you know, as you're growing closer to Jesus and in God's word and in the Bible, you know, have there been scriptures or Bible verses that maybe a life verse that you've, you know, clung to looking back at all this?
And, you know, there is one, and I tried to kind of think about that a little bit more and pray about it. And it's a real simple verse, but it's Matthew 19:26, I believe, where it says, "And Jesus said to them, with man, these things are not possible, but with God, all things are possible." And it's a simple verse, but to me it related to my life and my story, because so much of my story was I always thought I could make all things possible. I mean, you know, I sought out money, I sought out my own destiny, I sought out my own future, whatever, but nothing ever worked out. You know, I might have made some money, or I might have did this, or I might have did that, but I was never satisfied.
Yeah.
I always needed more. I always needed more. Just like my job right now, you know, if I was my old self, I'd be up there 5 or 6 days a week, because I can produce more than I'm producing there. But after I got back right with the Lord, or however, you know, quit trusting myself and started trusting God, I figured out that wasn't the important thing in my life anymore. So I think that verse tells me that the first half of it, nothing's possible with God, with man, but all things are possible with God. And I think that's kind of the story of my life, when I finally figured out that the things that I was seeking before made no difference, but the things that God had put before me and wanted me to do is what fulfilled my life, I guess. So, but I mean, there's several different verses that I guess, but that one, I guess, it's just simply to the fact telling me that I need to trust God, that He'll take care of everything.
Yeah, a good reminder.
Yeah.
Good reminder for us all. So, say someone's watching or listening to your story, Joe. What is one thing you want them to know when they walk away from this about your life or your walk with Jesus?
I guess, I guess probably the biggest thing is never, and I know you hear this in church all the time, but it's the truth. That's the reason you hear it all the time. Never think it's too late. Never think God's not walking beside you, even when you're not doing what you should do. Never think that God doesn't love us all the time. I mean, we don't deserve it, and we all know that. We know that we don't deserve it. But I guess that's the main thing, is just don't never think it's too late to come to Christ and give your soul to Him. I mean, because it's never too late.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was too late for years and years and years. But, and that was one of the excuses I used, was it's too late. I've done too many wrong things.
Yeah.
And people had convinced me of that. You know, I think probably the biggest obstacle in anybody's way is man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the devil, but it's man, you know, your peers. And so a lot of people, you know, I felt like it was too late, but it's never too late. And I think that's the biggest thing that I'd want, just for people anybody that would be listening, you know, if He accepted me, He can accept anybody. So
that's awesome. It's never too late. So if you are listening to this, there's a God that loves you. There's a God that is calling you through Jesus to be saved. And so, Joe, I appreciate your time, appreciate you sharing your heart, your story, your journey. And I'm excited to see what God does with your story.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, glad to be part of the church, and really appreciate everything God's did for me in my life.